Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny panel. Membership of the panel. I have apologies from Jonathan Milner, Co-op T, and Chris Friend, Co-op T. Councillor Harry McCarthy and Susie Lee Richards. I'm hoping that they'll be on the way. Item 2 minutes of previous meeting. Are they correct record? Thank you very much. Item 3, declaration of interest. If you've got any interest, please complete the form and hand it in to Jenny at the end of the meeting. Admission of the public, we don't have any? No?
All agenda items are public, Chair.
Yeah, but we've got no public in the gallery or
Not
online.
yet.
No, yeah, okay. Deputations and petitions. Yeah, I always remember that, you know. I always remember afterwards, right? Yeah, that, because I'm not used to introducing members or standing members of the committee each time. But if you want to introduce yourself, you can do. But I'm sure people know who you are, so we'll start from.
Yeah, it's mainly for people that are online, Chair. So Councillor John Taylor, Kirkburton.
Councillor Zarina Amin, Ashbrow.
Councillor Manisha Roma Kaushik from Crossland Moor and Netherton Ward.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5, deputation of the petitions. Have we got any?
None received.
None received. Item 6, housing growth update. So, Councillor Moses Crook, is this, or is it Councillor Graham Turner?
It's mine.
Sorry, Councillor Graham Turner.
Thank you, Chair. We've got a slide show for you to show where we are with some of our housing growth update programmes. This is all really positive, good stuff. So I'd like to thank officers for getting to this point to deliver so many positive projects at the moment in what we all know challenging times for us all. So I'll hand over to Liz. She'll run through the slides for you.
Thanks, Councillor. So I'm Liz Jefferson. I'm the Strategic Partnership Lead for Housing Growth, and today I'll be updating you on the issues that were presented to Scrutiny in July 2023. So I'll be talking about projects that span the following programmes: our strategic allocations, accelerated construction delivery, specialist and supported housing, affordable housing, our registered providers programme, our brokerage service, and what's in our pipeline sites. So first of all, just before I start to talk about our projects, it's important context for us to understand that we don't deliver anything in housing growth by working on our own. All our projects are delivered by working in partnership, both with external partners like our funding bodies, housing associations and consultants who support our work, and we work with a wide range of teams across the council. And this partnership working is at the heart of what we do, and it also means we're dependent on the resources of both internal and external teams to help us deliver housing. So if I can start by talking about our strategic site at Dewsbury Riverside. This is the largest housing allocation in Kirklees and is a key site in the West Yorkshire Strategic Place Partnership priorities. And there are multiple landowners on this site, including the council. Key milestones that we've achieved in the last year are the new allotments have been finished, so we're working with Capital Delivery, external partners AHR and Casey, and that site opened in May last year. Our communities colleagues presented work on Dewsbury Riverside as an exemplar at Homes England's National Community Engagement Training in July. And in August last year, planning permission was granted to create the main access road and deliver the first 350 homes. Joint working with Homes England has allowed us to undertake due diligence, infrastructure costing and viability work, master planning, a build-to-rent market assessment, and master developer audit reports. In November last year, we went to Cabinet and approval was given to enter into legal agreements, including with Homes England and Network Rail, and undertake an appropriate procurement route for the master developer. Strategic highways work's ongoing to understand the cumulative impact on the highways network, and we've commissioned legal advice to inform collaboration and equalisation principles and the appointment of a master developer. So our next strategic site is at Bradley Park. Sorry, I think there's just a bit of a lag with the slides. This is also a local plan housing allocation, mostly in council ownership, and the overall allocation is 68 hectares. So we've secured £800,000 of capital funding which was approved by Cabinet to help us progress the site. We're undertaking detailed highways work on the feasibility of delivering key junctions. And we've just started discussions on strategic property acquisitions to help support that highways work. We've drafted procurement documents and legal advice has been secured. It's not keeping pace. Yeah. I thought, yes. It's just lagging, Matthew, yeah, sorry. Shall I give you? Okay. Yeah, could I go? Yeah, could I have slide 5, please, Matthew? Thank you. So if we can move on to slide 6 now, please. Thank you. So at Ashview, we're delivering a 50-bed council extra care scheme within a wider development of 111 mixed tenure units, and of those 111, 98 will be for market sale and 13 will be affordable homes. External works have been completed on our extra care scheme and there was a topping out ceremony in January this year. So looking forward, we expect the extra care scheme to complete in September this year, the fit out and staff training to be delivered from October this year to January next, and for tenants to move in February 2025. May I have the next slide, please? So our site at Sut Hill is another local plan housing allocation where there's a number of pre-development constraints caused by mining history on the site, and we were successful in securing £4.5 million of grant from Homes England accelerated construction programme, which includes obligations to deliver at pace and incorporate modern methods of construction. Our contractors Keep Moat Homes, and it will deliver 319 homes in total, of which 95 will be affordable homes. So in the last year, we've achieved 86 plots under construction, 46 plots occupied, 65 affordable plots secured via the Section 106 agreement, and an extra 30 plots have been transferred to Housing Association in communities. May I have the next slide, please? At Kenmore Drive at Cleckheaton, we're delivering an 80-bed affordable extra care scheme and public open space working in partnership with Housing 21. And this scheme's been supported through Homes England's Affordable Homes programme. In the last year, we had a difficult start on site when the contractor became insolvent, but Housing 21 have successfully lined up a replacement. Robertson Construction, a multidisciplinary team of council officers has worked with Housing Growth to deliver this project, including public rights of way, planning, highways and legal colleagues. And successful resident engagement took place in December last year and a groundbreaking ceremony in February this year. The development's due to complete in March 2026. May I have the next slide, please? So looking at what we deliver in terms of affordable housing and brokerage, the Housing Growth team is the first point of contact to advise planning colleagues and developers about the different affordable housing needs across Kirklees. So delivery is secured via Section 106 agreements as part of the planning process, but we also work with registered providers of affordable homes, so housing associations, who we assist with advice and support, and we also work in partnership on projects like our Registered Providers Clusters programme, where we're working with Housing Association 13. Cabinet approved in June last year a fee for us to charge a fee to cover legal and administrative costs associated with us processing the sale of first home, starter homes and discount market sale homes. And then looking at our brokerage programme, this aims to increase housing delivery on privately owned sites. The team have created a brokerage brochure of stalled development sites across the district. And the team have also supported owners of stalled sites to apply for combined authority brownfield housing, including at Parkwood Mills, Huddersfield, and at Plain Street, Huddersfield, where 39 affordable homes that are being delivered by Unity Housing Association have just started on site. May I have the next slide, please? At Fenny Lane, Almonry, this is another council-owned housing allocation that's in our programme. We've used combined authority housing revenue funding to undertake due diligence on the site to inform our preferred disposal route. In Cabinet last November, we got approval to dispose of the site to a Homes England registered provider strategic partner via a competitive land sale. Since then, we've undertaken soft market testing and the land sale process is now starting to secure a development partner. And we've secured further WICA funding to support the site disposal. May I have the next slide, please? So this slide summarises our overall current position on delivery. So overall, we have 767 homes either on site or in various stages of the planning process, of which 445 are affordable homes. And we also have a further 1,234 homes that we're actively progressing. This is alongside 173 affordable homes that we've secured through Section 106 agreements in 2023 and 87 homes that we're supporting registered providers to deliver. So you can see that we've got a lot on site and we have a strong pipeline. And if I can have the final slide, please. And I would just like to end with a snapshot of the positive news coverage that our developments have achieved in the last year. Thank you.
Is that it? Okay, questions, comments from members?
Thank you. Thanks for that. Brilliant to have an update, and it's good to see some positive news coming through as well. So appreciate that. But as always, and that's what we're here for, we're here to ask questions. So if I may, on the Bradley Park one, we've been talking about Bradley Park for a number of years now, and I'm wondering why this one hasn't made the same progress that we've made in Dewsbury Riverside. And my questions are around, what is the major delay on that? Is it a capacity issue in the team, potentially? Because, there's a lot that you're trying to do, and, with the best will in the world, not everybody can do everything at the same time. And my other question was, you talked about detailed work going on with highways. I'm assuming this includes Cooper Bridge, and it'd be good to get a bit of an update about where we are with that, because that, again, is another one that we seem to talk about forever. But I know, Graham. But we ought to talk about where we are and what the barriers in place are and what we as a council are able to do to try and address some of that. On the Ashbrow scheme, which I think is really positive, although I was a little concerned when I saw the photograph of the people who were putting the tiles on the roof. Seemed to be a dodgy character in there. But on that one, it's really, really positive. But is it possible to give us a timeline on when this work started? Because we talk about when it's complete, and it's just to get an understanding of the elapse of time, really, on that one. And then my last questions were around the affordable housing delivery. I was really interested with the language you used, because I've raised this a number of times in a variety of committees, and you talked about, giving advice on the different affordable housing needs across Kirklees. Because whenever I've asked about affordable housing need, I've never really got an answer of how we determine it and how that differs across Kirklees, because I've been told there's a strategic housing need that is at Kirklees level, but nothing when I talk about my part of the district, because what I get on the doorstep is very, very different to what planners ask for in terms of the types of affordable housing. So I'd be really interested to know what these different affordable housing needs across Kirklees actually are, how we define the areas across Kirklees, and, you know, how local ward councillors can understand what the affordable housing need is in their patch and whether that differs from what they're hearing from local residents. And then my final question on the stalled sites. I think it's great that we're doing work with stalled sites, because that, you know, that's the thing we all, I suppose, occasionally get. Why are you building houses in my bit and why aren't you building them over there? But just how many stalled sites are we currently dealing with? If we you may not have that number with you today, I appreciate that, but that would be interesting to know as well. So I apologise for a number of questions, but hopefully they're helpful.
Thank you, John. You can pick and choose which one you want to answer. Who will answer?
Okay, I've tried to make a note of all of them, so I will try my best. So I think what I'm hearing is on Bradley, what's the delay? Are there issues with capacity in the team? And can we comment on Cooper Bridge? So the main challenge we have faced on Bradley is highways related, because Cooper Bridge is not coming forward in the way that we anticipated when the site went into local plan. So a lot of the work that we're doing is to focus on a phase 1 at Bradley Park, whilst the strategic issues at Cooper Bridge, which I think Edward might want to come in on, are worked through.
Yeah, so the status of the Cooper Bridge project is that we've got an outline business case approval through the Combined Authority. We're working on the full business case. There was a cabinet report, I think it was in January, that outlined the overall status of our transport programme, and that had an element where the Cooper Bridge scheme is having to be phased because given inflation and cost generally in the construction industry, the funding allocation that we had for the Cooper Bridge scheme was no longer sufficient for the entire scheme. So we've broken it into phases, and we're now working on phase 1, which is the Cooper Bridge roundabout end of the scheme, so the Cooper Bridge gyratory element only. And as Liz has said, there's a relationship between the Bradley Park housing allocation and the project. Phase 1 of the Cooper Bridge transport scheme enables phase 1 of the Bradley Park housing scheme to come forward, but future phases, the whole allocation of housing would need the whole transport scheme to be delivered, and we don't have funding for that at this point in time. It's a pipeline scheme.
Before you do, the other question you asked was the start on site for Ashborough.
Sorry, Chair, I've got a number of questions. They've responded on one. Can we just deal with that one before we move on to the other questions?
You had a number of questions. The question that, well, it's up to you how you want to.
Yeah, so I just think it makes more sense to have a discussion about this one item rather than move on to the others.
Yeah, but I've got other members as well, right? Yeah, you know, because I'll give you a supplementary, but I'm trying to be fair to you, John, because you asked a number of questions, yeah, and one of the questions you asked was Ashborough, start on site.
I'm sorry, me and you are not understanding each other here.
Well, I'm chairing the meeting, right? Yeah, so
yeah,
try and
asked
clarify.
A question.
Yeah, you've asked eight, 9 questions, John. I'm trying to make sure. You asked a question on Riverside. You asked a question on Bradley, Cooper Bridge, Ashborough, and then you talked about affordable housing. And one of the questions that you asked, correct me if I'm wrong, was start on site on Ashborough.
I asked a number of questions. I had responses on a couple of questions, and I'm just wanting to respond to those responses.
Go on then.
Thank you. So just on the Cooper Bridge, because the Cooper Bridge development is not just critical to Bradley Park, it's also really important for Dewsbury Riverside as well. And I just wonder at a subsequent meeting whether I'm not sure which is the right scrutiny panel to come to, but I guess you can give us some guidance on that. If we could bring back a picture of what that plan looks like, what the not just what phase 1 would be, what the full solution would be, and what those timings look like at the moment compared with the timings for the development of both of these housing developments, because obviously they're all interlinked, and unless we progress all of them, it's going to cause problems at some point. So that's really what I'm trying to tease out, if I may.
Yeah, very happy.
Yeah.
If we take that away, add it to the forward plan for scrutiny. I think it would be this scrutiny. So yeah, we can do that whenever it's scheduled in.
Okay, Zarina?
I'm just going to touch on the Ashbrow site. It just so happened I was there actually on Saturday, and I've been speaking to some residents, and I think it's the way the topography of the land lies. It's actually started to result in antisocial behaviour, and whether you're aware and whether there's any measures that have been sought to put in place to try and combat that.
That isn't feedback that I'd heard. Are you able to give me a little bit more detail?
Do you want to give the details after the
I'm
meeting?
happy to talk to you about
Yeah, that would
in
be
depth later on, if that's okay.
If you could email me, because as I say, that's not something we've been hearing from residents, but...
Right, okay.
But we
I mean, the police are aware, and they're working with the residents, and
Was that a recent
developer.
issue that you picked up?
That was a recent issue.
Yeah. So if you want to just pass the
I think
details
it's
over.
mainly to do with the topography and the way the land lies.
It is a difficult topography
Yeah.
because it's like a sort of upturned basin. Yeah.
So it's something that I'd need to go through with yourself in detail.
All right,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more? Councillor Smage?
Yeah, I've got a question, please. I could never observe a meeting quietly. It's great that you've got a lot of affordable housing in the pipeline, but how many affordable houses do you need within this year for your strategic housing assessment? How many have you going to achieve, and how many do you need for next year, and how many have you got in the pipeline for next year and moving forward? Because it just will give a balance as to, these are great projects, but are we achieving the numbers that we need to? Thank you.
Okay, so we need, according to the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, which I think it's worth saying is being revisited as part of Local Plan 2, so it's quite old now. Sorry, did you want to come in?
No, you can go out.
We need 1,040 affordable homes per year. Every year in Kirklees. I've touched on in my concluding slide what we're delivering at the moment. So that's 445. So as a council, so that is a challenge. It is a challenge for us. But obviously we're not the only ones delivering housing. We work with our registered provider partners all the time, and affordable homes are delivered on private sites through Section 106 agreements as well.
That quite often we have a percentage of properties that we want on large sites as affordable homes, and through negotiation or whatever, those get reduced. And therefore, are our processes robust enough to give us the number of affordable houses that we need within Kirklees as part of all the developments that are currently ongoing within Kirklees, both ours and private?
Can I just come in at that?
Yeah, Councillor, yeah,
Going
sorry.
back to the strategic housing, we just actually, I think we're just about to go out to tender. Just going out to tender for a new update on that, because we need that as part of the local plan. So that will be looked at. Just going back to robustness, I think we're robust. I think what the problem is for a significant amount of time, there hasn't been enough support from central government to help us with this, because, and I'm not blaming this government, I'm blaming the previous government as well. That was, I remember that group, if you like. Nobody's quite got it right. I've sat where John is, and I sat where you are, and I had a gentleman sat where you are when I was on planning committee in this very room who argued to take out affordable homes because he was only making 17.5% profit if he left those in, and he wanted his full 20. And I know that chap, I'm not going to mention names, is worth in excess of £250 million. That's the problem. Whilst developers want their pound of flesh and another pound on top of it, That's always going to hold the affordable homes back. We work for as maximum amount we can, but as I said, it's the developers who want their absolute maximum pound of flesh, and that's what's part of the problem. Until that understanding is changed, and they'll have a reasonable return on their investment. They've got to have a return, I get that, but any business that I know, and I've ever dealt with, 20% margin, they bite your legs off. They bite your legs off for 10, let alone 20%. So that's one of the problems, is some of the developers wanting too much out of the scheme, and it's always at the expansion of Section 106 and always affordable homes. It needs a review, and we know there's lots of reviews coming in the planning system, but that's one that definitely needs reviewing.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Any more questions? Councillor Taylor?
Chairman, you haven't allowed them to answer all the questions I asked. You only let them answer one question.
And that's the point I was making, John. Thank you very much. You've just so which questions haven't they asked, John? Because obviously you made a note of the questions you've asked. So which questions do you want to be answering?
I'm losing the plot here. Normally in scrutiny, and I've been a scrutiny member for a number of years. What happens is scrutiny members are asked to ask questions. They ask questions, and then the officers answer those questions.
John, can you put that your question?
I'm sorry, I've already asked the questions. The officers know what the questions are. They'll happily answer them if you give them a chance to. But you as chairman are stopping them from answering questions.
John, you're being very unreasonable. Seriously, I don't know what the problem is. Like, yeah, I'm trying to get your questions answered, and that's the point I was making. Look, let's get the officers to answer your question. Officers.
Okay, so if I can just go back to your question on Bradley, you asked about the capacity in the team. So I think we've covered the highways issues, if you're happy with that. We are quite a small team delivering a big programme, as you've observed, but what I'd like to reassure you is that while we're working on the highways issues on Bradley, we're working in tandem to be ready to go out for a procurement for a development partner. So we're running it at the same time, but I do also agree with your point that we're quite a small team running a big programme, but a very committed team supported by colleagues across the council and by external consultants and support as well. Okay. So Ashbrow, your question was about when it started. May I clarify, when the construction started or when we actually started on the...
So to be fair, what I'm trying to get a sense of is the time elapsed between us making a decision to do something and us moving residents in, because then that's applicable to all the other stuff that we do. It gives you a feel for, do these tend to be 2-year programmes, 4-year programmes? You know, it's more that, so I'm not looking at exact dates, it's just a feel for.
So I've worked on that since 2017. That has been, I will say that has been a particularly challenging project to deliver due to a variety of circumstances, including the pandemic, Brexit, the war in Ukraine, that impacted construction prices very significantly. But I can tell you definitively I've worked on that since 2017.
And I suppose the follow-on question from that really obviously is, are there key learnings that we've got from that we can then apply to more later developments and try and avoid some of those pitfalls that you've obviously been through on that one?
We definitely take lessons learned from all our projects. I can see Councillor Turner's nodding as well. We learned a lot working on Ashview in particular, and yes, the team are very diligent in taking forward all the lessons learned on all our projects. I think your next question was about how we determine housing need. I will say this isn't I'm being honest, this isn't my absolute specialist subject. But again, we use the strategic housing market assessment, which we've touched on in answering other questions. I think colleagues from housing services have said to us, we need everything everywhere. That's the reality of the housing need in the district. But when when our affordable team are responding to planning applications, they use the strategic housing market assessment to look specifically at the need in that market area. So I'd suggest that is perhaps where you would want to start to look.
Yeah, thank you. And I accept it's not your specialist area, so I'm not going to quiz you on it because that's a bit unfair. But it would be interesting if at a subsequent meeting we could have a bit of a deep dive on this strategic housing need, because if we're going out to procurement for a new one, I want to make sure that when I go back and talk to my residents, I can confidently talk to them about the fact that the council recognises the needs in their place, and not that what we've got, which we seem to have had in the previous one, is a Kirklees level housing assessment, which then doesn't recognise the very different natures of our communities. So that's where I was, and it's when you said different affordable housing needs in different areas, I thought, oh,
I
we
think
must
the
have
officer wants to
something.
respond, John, if you let him.
Yeah, so this came up, didn't it, when we talked about the local plan? And so I think it's probably, again, it's probably a suggestion for the future work programme. We talked, didn't we, about, well, through the local plan process and the review of the housing market assessment, what are these areas? How granular can they be? What's the scope from a policy perspective to have differential policies at a more granular level? Are they a unit of geography that makes sense to people in the way they live their lives? How can things like place standard be taken on board to feed into this intelligence? So there's a whole bundle of issues around the new housing market assessment. I would probably suggest looking at the old one that gets older by the day probably isn't. I think it's about looking forward around the new one. How are we doing it? What's it telling us? And the feedback and the input into it, I think, is perhaps an item for the future work programme. It came out of the local plan discussions. It's come up again today. It feels like a biggie.
Yeah, no, I think that's the correct approach to look at it in the future work programme. John, is there any other question that you would like answering?
I've got one that I didn't mention before, which I've just noted I've written a question mark. In terms of our pipeline going forward, one of the ones I noticed down there as being to be delivered by 2030, so not yet started, was estate buildings in town. I know we've talked about that a number of times here. I was wondering, I thought we'd started to make progress on that, but the way this reads, it kind of suggests it's not yet up and running, but I thought we were already in negotiations on that one. So if it's possible, just an update on that, please, if I may.
So we have done some work with 13 who were working on an RRP clusters programme. Unsurprisingly, viability on a grade 2 star listed building is a big challenge. That's something that we're working through at the moment. We've got active funding applications in, but it is a challenging building to work with, but equally very high on our priority list. I think you had one other question about how many stalled sites we had as well. Yes. I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that, but may I get it to you outside this meeting? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have all the questions been answered? Councillor Turner?
Yeah, I just want to sort of sum up, if you like, some of these sites. Stalled sites are a challenge, aren't they? And what concerns me more than, in some ways, the stalled sites is the 8,000 planning application that's been passed that's not been developed, because that's a lot of houses. So that bothers me somewhat more than stalled sites, because they're sat there on a shelf gathering dust. We spent money processing the planning application. Most of them have probably been to a committee, which costs us a small arm and a leg. So we've done our bit, and then the developers say, right, I'll put it on the shelf there and wait now. So that is a frustration when all the work's been done, the hard work, because some of these planning applications take a lot of effort on developers as well as council, and then they don't get it developed. That's what, for me, is a frustration. Going back to some of the sites, Bradley's particularly challenged, and I've walked the Bradley site, had a good look at it, and it is the access issues that's a problem. While we were on site, we discussed the solution, and I know that's moving forward now, so hopefully that will help with some of the issues. But you're right, Cooper Bridge just playing it. Cooper Bridge obviously is in it, will be challenging the next local plan as well. So we do need to see what we can do with that, but we all know the circumstances and costs, etc. around that, but we continue to move forward with it. But on the whole, I think the team do a fantastic job. As Liz rightly points out, it's a relatively small team, and look at some of the success stories there. Batley Sutale, a fantastic success story. Again, very challenging. Took a number of years to get to the point of getting where we're on. But I've been on that site a number of times, and the speed at which they build those houses and the quality of accommodation that they provide is fantastic. And that, again, working with our partners, Keepmoat, he's been will, when it's finished, be a fantastic success story, and will provide much needed houses down there. So, yeah, it is a small team, but they are delivering some fantastic projects. Estate buildings is now wind and watertight. That work's been done. it is challenging to make the figures stack up because, as rightly pointed out, it's grade 2 star listed. Can't willy-nilly knock walls down and things like that. So, and they're expensive if you wanted to knock them down. So it's challenging. We're still definitely working on it and negotiating with people. If we can get some external funding in, I'd love to see people living in that building because it'll breathe new life into it. Because otherwise, what do you do with it? Because it's grade 2 star. I've been in numerous times. It's a fantastic building inside, and it would be great to see it back into use. So, yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get some funding and move people in there. Be a fantastic opportunity for people to live right opposite the train station with the Transpennine. I think people snap them up if we can get the viability gap down.
Thank you very much, officers. Any more questions, Councillor Harry McCarthy?
Thanks, Chair. I think it follows on from something Graham, Councillor Turner just said about sites where we've got planning permission but no development has happened whatsoever. And obviously there's quite a few across the district, but to give an example, in my ward there's one where it's right next to the M62. It's a brownfield site. It's an eyesore. Everyone complains about it. It's something that actually residents would like to see developed. I guess it's the support that you could provide to, well, if ward councils come forward with an idea of like trying to develop something about trying to get that developed and help and get some affordable housing on there, because at the moment there isn't particularly anything that we can do as ward councillors, so it was just about kind of support for bringing those sites forward.
So I touched on that when we talked about our brokerage programme. Is the site in private ownership?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Okay. So with our brokerage team, we're obviously always happy to talk to developers about the barriers that they're facing. I touched on we've been able to support some private developers to apply for funding from the Combined Authority. So I'd encourage yourself and your ward colleagues or the developer to speak to our brokerage team about that. Again, if you want to email me outside the meeting, then I can pick it up with the brokerage team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, officers.
Chair, just as a reminder, we're going to just do a little timeline on the homelessness strategy before we move on to the next item on the agenda.
Right, so what part of the agenda is that then?
Just as part of this housing growth.
Oh, part of this, yeah. Okay, so are you going to do that, Naz?
Yes.
Yeah, go on then.
So, as part of the housing growth agenda, Chair, Scrutiny panel, we've agreed that we will outline for yourselves so that you understand when we're going to bring the homelessness strategy as a refresh. So I've got Sarah just to talk through that. So our current homelessness strategy runs until 2023. It's up for review now. We've kicked off that process and started some consultation work. We just wanted to have you understand how that fits into the housing growth agenda, but also help the panel understand when it comes into this panel for greater consideration. Do you mind just putting this slide?
Yeah, this slide just clarifies what our process is going to be in terms of timings of completing the refresh of the Kirklees Preventing Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy. It is a statutory duty for every local authority to have one of these strategies, and the current Kirklees strategy runs from 2018 to 2023, so will be expiring later this year and needs to ultimately be signed off by Cabinet sometime in the summer. What you can see on that slide is the flight path that we are following, and I think the important thing for members to know is that we are aiming to bring the refreshed draft strategy here to this scrutiny committee. We're aiming to do that sometime in early July, but it's subject to obviously confirming the dates that are available and confirmed in the municipal year. But it will be coming here to scrutiny before it goes to Cabinet for sign-off. Something we're also keen to do is to engage with members during the refresh stage, and we've issued an invite to all of the political groups for individual sessions at group meetings, so hoping that you'll all take up the opportunity to have a bit of a longer session within your groups, but it will also be coming here to scrutiny in that order shown on the screen.
Thank you very much. Any questions, John?
Yeah, I'm just a little worried about the timeline. If that says it's coming here in early July and going to Cabinet in mid-July, that gives no time for any changes to be made, because the papers probably for the Cabinet papers will probably need to be out almost at the same time as you come here to meet and talk to us. So that suggests you're not really doing any pre-decision scrutiny, because at that point it's too late to make any changes. So I would just ask that we go away and look at the timetable again. You know, if we're going to do pre-decision scrutiny, we need to do it properly and give enough time for at least, you know, some summary work to be done before it goes to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, yes, we'll confirm that. We will have a review that timeline. It's a draft timeline, so thank you for that, Councillor Taylor.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7, ad hoc scrutiny panel, health and safety compliance in residential housing stock, detail of progress and next steps. Councillor Moses Crook, you want to introduce this?
Thanks, Chair. I'll just give a very quick introduction and then I'll hand over to officers to flesh it out with detail. So this report provides an update on progress to date against the recommendations of the Ad Hoc Scrutiny Panel's Health and Safety Compliance Report and recommendations to Cabinet from December 2022. The report has already been brought to both the Homes and Neighbourhoods Improvement Board and to Cabinet in September and October last year, with both agreeing to the officer recommendation going forward. Of the 17 recommendations made by the ad hoc panel, 2 are completed, 6 are identified as continuous ongoing issues and are now included as part of best practice, and the remaining 9 are assessed to be at 50% progress to completion or better. The approved recommendation is that less frequent but still regular reporting to the Building Safety Assurance Board is now needed in order to provide ongoing assurance, since the change and good practice is now embedded. I'd just like to add that I think it's very positive to have this alignment between the cross-party Homes and Neighbourhoods Improvement Board, officers and Cabinet, especially in light of the regulator's recent finding. The response needed here requires us all to work together constructively across the whole Council to drive improvement and to demonstrate and ensure that safety of our tenants is and remains collectively our highest priority. That's all I wanted to say to introduce this, so I'll just pass over. Is there something more you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Crook. Thank you, Chair. So really, I just wanted to focus on some of the key achievements since the ad hoc scrutiny panel took its recommendations to the Cabinet in December 2022. So we've, for the last 12 months, we've been very focused on ensuring that we get a system of safety in place. So we've put a fire safety system matrix together. That recommendation from the scrutiny panel has now been completed. As part of that work, what we've done is really focused on the management plans for fire safety, for asbestos and lifts in particular, but with a kind of a review of where we were with gas safety checks and electrical safety checks, because that's quite a well-managed risk within the council. And so we put them further down in terms of the priority order. Cabinet approved this month the fire safety management plan, and we're now working on ensuring that the process that the policy relates to is robust enough to, particularly given the context that we're operating in as part of the regulator's notice, to improve the way we manage fire safety. So that's been a good progress, making sure that the processes that follow that and the data that falls out of those processes is the bit that we're just finalising now before we embed that within the teams and ensure there's training, communication and a good operation of that new management plan. The asbestos plan is ready, as is the lift plan. We now just need to get it through Cabinet for approval and then embed those as well. The asset system implementation. Currently, we're working on implementing our housing management system, which has been slightly delayed, and Cabinet approved the revised strategy for delivery of that. That is going to be the master system for all the Homes and Neighbourhoods activity. It holds the unique reference points as well for all our asset data. So we have to ensure that we've implemented that first before we can scope out the requirements for an asset management system. So that will follow straight after we've implemented CX, which is our housing management and contact system. In terms of data validation, the scrutiny panel did identify this as a key area of focus for the service, so that we had integrity and accuracy in the reports that we put forward. It also, in terms of the recommendations of the panel, the panel were keen to also see a separation between the service doing their business reports and there being a second line of defence to check and scrutinise that the sources of data, the methodology, etc., were appropriate and accurate, so that the assurance mechanisms within the council could take confidence in the reporting. So we did quite a lot of work on data validation post-scrutiny. We worked with our colleagues in IT and in data and intelligence to ensure that the current system that manages our assets, which is Asprey, and some modules that sit underneath that, were collecting the data. So we had to make sure that we had all our assets in scope. We were ensuring that we had a mechanism to make sure that when we do a right to buy sale, for instance, that comes off the asset system and the asset register. Any new schemes that people like Liz develop and bring into the council, such as Ash Brow, in terms of the extra care, that we've got that on the system and in scope for all those safety inspections and re-inspections. We also commissioned an external validation of our data, particularly on inspections and re-inspections, because one of the weaknesses that we had when we first took transfer of our stock back into the council was that we weren't really clear about where our inspection programs were. Savills came in and did a very thorough and robust review and audit of how we manage our data across each of the big 6 compliance areas, and gave us really a clean bill of health, but with some anomalies that we've now fixed. So now we've got real confidence in that data around inspections and re-inspections. We've also now started working with our corporate data and insight team to ensure that we have a robust data governance and management policy, so that everybody is clear about how we manage data within homes and neighbourhoods, that the accuracy of the data follows the process capture points, and that we store and record and maintain the golden thread that is now required, certainly by the building safety regulator. One of our key issues in progressing some of the actions, I think, is capacity and in pockets of the team capability. We've reviewed that structure. We've reviewed the skills gaps. We've identified where those gaps are. We've now got the structure agreed, and it's gone through the business case and challenge process. And we're now recruiting to that bit of the structure. It has to be said, it's not that we haven't tried to recruit prior to this. The market is incredibly challenging for building safety type resources, because everybody in the social housing sector is looking for that kind of skill set, which is because that's been intensified by the advent of the building safety regulator, the housing ombudsman being much more emboldened now, and the regulator of social housing having new powers, particularly over council housing stock. So that structure now is being recruited to. We've made some great strides. We're also not relying on just permanent recruitment, because we know that for a fact that we may not be successful, even though we've initiated the processes to recruit. We've been to the market several times and not always been successful. So given the scale of work and the regulatory notice and the urgency and immediacy of some of our work, particularly around fire, we have started to recruit interims, so that it gives us the chance to get the right capability and the right skill set in place in terms of the permanent recruitment. We also have done quite a lot of work around resident engagement, particularly around the most vulnerable residents, and doing person-centred fire risk assessments. We also have a number of fire safety champions across the district. We have 17 fire safety champions who are reporting into the tenant voice panel, and we meet regularly with the tenant voice panel to engage on issues. Engagement broadly, I think, has been good. We have a dedicated team around fire safety to engage with them, particularly around the high-rise blocks and the six-storey blocks. We've also got quite a lot of communication going out to councillors, but not necessarily as general communications, but where we are in council awards doing work on, say, the high-rise or the six-storey blocks, that they are part of that, and they understand what works will be done, and are able to support residents in their role as councillors. Chair, I don't want to say any more on that, but invite questions.
Questions? Councillor Amin?
Thank you for the update. I've just got some concerns. I'm reading at paragraph 3.6. The cost to the council is 300,000 per year, and that's complaints. That's quite high. And you know, are we doing anything to combat that in terms of
3.61, 3.6 actually, and 3.61.
Apologies, are we on a different item, Chair?
is it
What
not
item?
housing stock?
Sorry, what?
Yeah. Oh, right. Apologies.
You're doing the wrong
I've
report.
jumped ahead.
Okay, so you can. Have you got any questions on this report? No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smage?
Yeah, thank you. As chair of the ad hoc that carried out the work, it was a couple of years ago now, and it is concerning that a number of the recommendations from Scrutiny are still in progress or at amber. I understand that there has been a lot of work undertaken, but it is still concerning that there are only a few of the recommendations that are complete. It also concerns me that if you're saying the Building Assurance Board will not be looking at this as often, who then will be ensuring, and where is the impetus to ensure that the recommendations do reach a conclusion? Because many of these recommendations do fall into what is required from the council to be compliant. And I would like to know why the Building Assurance Board feels that it needs to take a less of an approach on these recommendations.
No?
Taking the Building Safety Assurance Board reporting. So the Building Safety Assurance Board receives two separate reports on building safety. One is a comprehensive, detailed report on performance against the requirements to be compliant. So against the big six, we will report on individual lines around how we are doing on inspection programs, re-inspection programs, and remediation programs and progress with. So the Building Safety Assurance Board believes that that level of assurance on ongoing activity is the more important part of what they do. I think the work of the Ad hoc Scrutiny Panel, which, as you know, we valued greatly, and I think the recommendations are important, and we do need to ensure we keep a focus on them. And the service is absolutely clear that those are a priority focus for us. If we stand back from them, though, post the recommendations and unravelling those recommendations and what the implementation plans look like, they are significant pieces of work. So it might say implement a new IT system, for instance, but I don't need to say to this panel, what a big piece of work that is. And also it relies on corporate resources that are working on other systems implementations as well. So phasing those in is important. Management plans are more than just writing a document. It's about ensuring that we understand how we do things, what the roles and responsibilities in each of those looks like, who's doing what, do we have the technical competencies available to manage those in terms of the compliance agenda, because the building safety regulator expects a certain degree of competence, which then goes hand in hand with that skills matrix and skills gap work that we did. So these are significant pieces of work, and we've been trying to do them with half a team, because, not because we've not tried to get the capacity in, it's because it's proven incredibly challenging in the marketplace to try and get those resources in. So I believe, and I would recommend that to this panel as well, is that the service has made huge progress since the Cabinet endorsed the recommendations of the Scrutiny Panel, which was in December 22. Whilst I appreciate the panel concluded its deliberations prior to that, they weren't endorsed by Cabinet until December 22, which gave officers the mandate to deliver those in that context. And I've just mentioned a couple of those recommendations that Scrutiny Panel made that are sizable recommendations that require a wholesale review of how we do things within those items, and then coming up with the responses that are needed. We've also had to commission external consultants to kind of be mindful of the scrutiny panel's recommendations about independent validation of what we are doing, and that we don't just mark our own homework. So they're just big pieces of work, which I believe the service and the council have made great progress on and huge strides in, despite the challenges that we face, both internally and externally.
Yeah, but I'm still concerned that there is no, if it goes less to the Building Assurance Board, where is it going to go? Who is going to be saying, how are we doing on these recommendations? What are we doing? What progress we are making? Because one of them was a robust procurement strategy. One of them was mandatory training. Now, you're saying that your mandatory training is only 50% complete in the report, if I've got that right. Well, surely there should be more of a push to actually put that in place.
So it's worth noting, just to answer two questions really in one. So the Building Safety Assurance Board receives these reports regularly and does have oversight. The Homes and Neighbourhoods Improvement Board also has regular reports into it on building safety, but also the progress with the scrutiny action plan. In terms of the mandatory training, for example, you're absolutely right, 50% complete. We've targeted those people that, against the Building Safety Act, need that mandatory training first. So we have prioritised the cohorts of teams that we need to train up. We have 900 staff in homes and neighbourhoods, many of whom are out in the field, and that's their job. And we have to operationally manage those impacts whilst we maintain service and service levels. So even on mandatory training, I believe we've made good progress, and we've ensured that we have prioritised the right roles for that technical competence that will be needed to comply.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I want to go in a slightly different direction, actually. I think some of the items that you're reporting here as not complete, actually you could easily confirm as being complete. And one thing, and it does seem to be a council thing, we produce plans, and then in our plans we always put ongoing. Well, ongoing is meaningless. It has no start or end date. So, for example, and I just use this as an example, number 6 says that progress updates be provided to Cabinet on a regular basis whilst the compliance recovery programme is ongoing. Well, you're doing that. So, in my mind, that action is complete. Okay. But you've got it down as ongoing action. So you're saying it's not complete. And there are a number like that. And what I think you could have done, and maybe take this away as a suggestion, is that on each of these, if there is in progress or ongoing action or something like that, put a bit more detail in there. So just to pick up Liz's point about training, and I know from sitting on the Housing Improvement Board, so I'm at advantage to some of my colleagues here because I've got more information, but I know that we've talked about how you're prioritising who needs to get that training. Well, you could have produced something today that says we have, I think you said 900 staff. Of that 900 staff, 300 have already been trained, or whatever the numbers will be. We have prioritised, these are priority 1, 2, 3. Priority 1 have all been done, priority 2, 60%. And then it gives you more evidence about the progress and gives more confidence. The other point I would pick up is we have got a risk manager now. We also have an internal audit team with Martin. You could say, well, we're going to ask internal audit to go and look at some of these occasionally. So, for example, that one I've just used as we provide regular progress updates to Cabinet. You could say that's complete, and then Martin, in 6 months' time, has a look to see if, well, have they updated Cabinet? Because I think you're presenting probably a less positive picture than probably the reality is in some of this. So I just think it's one to perhaps take away and have a look at, and just think about how you're presenting that information. Because some of these are complete, and you guys are on top of it. But if you read this, a member of the public or somebody who's concerned reads it, it doesn't read like that. So I'm just trying to be helpful.
Fair point, and thank you for the support, Councillor Taylor. And on the Cabinet reporting, by way of example, because it says regular reporting, we have reported and updated Cabinet. So taking your position, we could say that's complete. But we're going to ongoingly report, aren't we? So to keep them updated. So the question is, you know, do we say that's complete because we've started doing it?
Well, I suppose the question
I'm happy to say it's completed.
Do you have a process in place to make sure that a regular update is reported to Cabinet? If you can demonstrate that there's a process in place, that's complete. You know, that's all you need to do, really.
I mean, can I just come in, Chair, a little bit? It does feel to me that this is related to Liz's question as well about who gives assurance. And it seems to me that once the new processes are embedded, and we have that level of assurance, then it transfers and responsibility will go to the Homes and Neighbourhoods Improvement Board and to the Executive to provide ongoing assurance. Whether we classify that as closed or whether we say that's an ongoing issue that we will continue to have oversight of forever as a housing provider is just a question of semantics, really, I think. But I take your point. It's about transferring it from this ad hoc scrutiny report to our general day-to-day business through the board and the executive. But I think it's actually a positive to say that things are ongoing but no longer require consistent assurance from the BSAB, because our normal processes of the board and escalation to the executive are sufficient to provide assurance on safety and training and so forth. So I think there's a positive within the numbers there. Thanks.
Any more questions? Yeah. I think. Sorry, no. Yeah. I think Councillor Crook, what you just mentioned is the critical piece for me. The ultimate accountability and responsibility is the Cabinet, and that's where the assurance and that's where the buck stops, more or less. And I understand, Naz, from what you said was Cabinet approved all this in December 2022. So we'll just keep an eye on how things progress.
And Cabinet have received an update in October.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions on this? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is, let me just get my papers, item 8, complaints handling in homes and neighbourhoods. Who's taking that one? Is it
It's me.
Moses again?
Me again.
Moses?
Thanks, Chair. I'll just give a quick introduction again, if that's all right. So complaints handling in homes and neighbourhoods. This report provides an update on the position with respect to complaints handling performance within homes and neighbourhoods, as well as measured outcomes in terms of the tenant satisfaction measures. This is to align with the new requirements on complaints handling for social housing landlords and the updated Ombudsman's Complaints Handling Code, which was published on February the 8th and requires statutory compliance by the 1st of April. Ahead of April, a review is needed to report on where we remain compliant with the change and where work is needed to ensure ongoing compliance. And then following implementation, regular self-assessment will be required, and the results will be published annually along with the tenant satisfaction measures. From April the 1st, excuse me, the Ombudsman has to monitor performance on complaints handling and compliance, and homes and neighbourhoods could be inspected on the consumer standards at any time from then. Feedback from this Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny panel is very much welcome to support ongoing improvement in tenant satisfaction in that context. This report also provides a contemporary update on complaints handling. This shows that overall numbers are up on previous period, but you will have seen from the papers that this forms part of a more complex picture with response times continuing to improve. The number of cases referred to the Ombudsman has also increased slightly but remains low and with no severe maladministration findings. There is certainly an opportunity to interrogate this data in detail, to learn from trends and to improve both broader services and complaints handling. Thanks. I'll pass over to Naz, is it, or Michelle? Michelle.
Hi, good morning, thank you. I'm going to start and I'm going to pass on to Robert. So I'll just following on from Councillor Crook. Yeah, we are within a new regulatory framework in relation to complaints handling. Just thought it'd be useful to go back a bit. So from by December 2020, all social landlords, including Kirklees Council, were mandated to undertake the first of what we call a self-assessment to measure our performance in relation to complaints handling. And that was against the original Housing Ombudsman's Complaints Code. It was primarily for guidance and to get a status of where the sector was. However, in Kirklees, we continued that process and continued to do annual self-assessments. In 2022, also in line with the Complaints Handling Code at the time, we published a new complaints handling strategy, and that was with support from the Housing Quality Network. That included a new policy and a compensation, and updated our compensation procedures to ensure we were fully in line with the code. The latest version of the code, as Councillor Crook has mentioned, becomes statutory from April, and work is now ongoing to ensure we meet all mandatory requirements, which will align with the new inspection regime that will follow from April, led by the regulator for social housing. Just want to touch on one point. The latest consultation that's informed the new code was launched last September and concluded in February. Initially, during the consultation, there was proposals around a joint code for local authorities, which was joining the Housing Ombudsman's Code and the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's Code. However, the updated and final version of the code, which is referenced in this report, focuses now on alignment. So the government's moved away from a joint code and is now talking about alignment where possible with both codes. And that will be effective from 2026. This will be useful for local authorities because it will support the Council's longer-term aim to have one corporate approach in terms of how we handle complaints in whatever aspect of the local authority's business. As part of the new regulations, we will submit an annual self-assessment, and the first one will be submitted by June this year as part of our submission of the tenant satisfaction measures. And they'll be published and will be in the public domain from autumn. And it's a measure that will ensure that there's consistency across the sector in how we report against complaints, so we can judge our performance on a more even footing. The complaints handling does form part of the new consumer standards, in particular the Transparency, Influence and Accountability Consumer Standard, which is very much about the voice of the tenant and the opportunities and accessibility for tenants as customers to be able to tell their landlord how they're doing. Just to touch on some of the performance, so in response to that, where are we now? And we've included in the report a summary of our performance for last year, January to December. So we had 979 formal complaints, and that was an 100% increase on the previous year. Primary reasons for that is there's a lot more work that we're doing to make tenants aware of their ability to complain. The Ombudsman has also been doing its part in making tenants aware nationally about complaints as a way of telling their landlords how they're performing. The primary reason for complaints in Kirklees and dissatisfaction are around poor information, poor communication, and where further work is required, and about how well or not well we're keeping tenants informed. For last year, despite a lot of good work, 60% of our complaints were upheld, which means that there's still a lot more work that we need to do to improve tenant satisfaction and drive up standards. Because if complaints have been upheld, that's saying the tenants are right. We've not done something right, we could have done something better, or we've not provided the right level of information. Last year, the Housing Ombudsman made 3 maladministration determinations against Kirklees, and that's where we failed to do something, something should have happened, or should not have happened, or there was unreasonable delays. We've had no severe maladministrations, and they're the ones that are made public, and that's where there's a major hazard or risk of significant harm, negligence or incompetence, and they will be published by the Housing Ombudsman and could trigger further action by the regulator, because the regulator and the Housing Ombudsman do work together operating under a memorandum of understanding. We had no complaint handling failure orders against Kirklees, and that's where landlords do not comply with action. So if the Ombudsman asks you to do something, you don't do it in a timely way, then you can have a complaint handling failure order. As part of the last tenants survey that we did, the annual 2023 survey, we did ask tenants how satisfied or dissatisfied they were with our approach to complaints handling. And only 23% of customers said they were satisfied. That isn't where we want to be, understandably. We also carried out a text survey once somebody has complained and a resolution. That was slightly higher, and that was 42.1% were satisfied with their experience. We want to continue doing that because obviously on an annual basis you get a snapshot of maybe somebody who hasn't had a complaint or will have had a complaint a long time ago. When we do it after a resolution, it's very immediate, and we get a reflection of how they're feeling. But we continue to look at different ways of how we can capture information directly from tenants so we understand how we're performing. What we've included in the report is 3 case studies to give you a real flavour of how we deal with complaints and what the experience is of the tenants. But what's key in complaints handling, and the Housing Ombudsman continues to promote this, is around learning. So it's the so what. What are you doing once you get a complaint? How are you learning? So what I'm going to do is pass over to Robert now to take you through some of that.
As Michelle has outlined, in the last 18 months or so, from a complaints handling perspective, we've done a great deal within homes and neighbourhoods in terms of making sure we're compliant with the code. We've introduced a new policy and strategy, etc. And as Michelle's alluded to, you can see by making more open and accessible, the number of complaints have gone up. You know, nearly 1,000 complaints in 2023. Just to let you know, complaints, the majority of complaints come through online or the website now. So that's about 50%. 40% generally come through the telephone. I think, again, to pick up what Michelle said, the work that we need to do is to address the number of complaints that have been upheld. So we're okay, we're in a stronger position from a complaints handling perspective, but the high number of complaints that have been upheld means that there's work that we need to do to improve services. So item 2.44 provides some examples of what we're doing. I think one of the key things, again, since the code was introduced, we need to move away from tackling the volumes of complaints to addressing why complaints are being made. So we basically, in essence, reduce the number of complaints in the first instance. One of the ones we're finding is we would need to prevent escalation to stage 1, stage 2, and even the Ombudsman. And one of the things that we're finding is that, you know, we need to provide more clear timescales when we're going to do something. And if we say we're going to do something, we actually do it. And what we are finding is that, you know, things are drifting, hence why people are escalating it to stage 2 or even the Ombudsman. As the new code comes in from next week, we're going to do a new suite of training for managers, investigating managers and staff, so they're aware of the requirements around the code, the policy, but also in terms of the essential bit is learning from complaints as well. We're also changing the way we gather information. Michelle's alluded to the fact that we use poor information supplied or lack of communication. That makes it difficult to delve into the real themes, e.g. is it ASB, is it damp and mould, is it repairs? So from next week, our data gathering will be different, so it'll help us to really home in on the themes of what people are complaining about. Again, in terms of what we do at the moment is we do a tech satisfaction survey for people who registered a complaint. Responses are low in that. So what we are going to do is we're going to start doing actually, we're going to have a conversation with complainants to feedback, and we're going to use the TSM question as a starter to understand more about people's experience of complaints. And then just one final thing is in terms of we need to ensure that we align our approaches with the 500 plus Pinnacle properties. The council is still the landlord of them properties. So again, any judgments will be against us as a landlord rather than Pinnacle as the housing management provider. That shouldn't be hard because all landlords need to work to the code. The policy needs to make sure that it's a two-stage process, for example, that the, you know, easy access to the housing ombudsman. But again, we just need to make sure that Pinnacle are aligned with our complaints handling code. So I'll leave it at that.
Questions, Councillor Taylor?
Thank you for the comprehensive report. I'm interested a little bit in the trends, because what we get here is like an annual picture, So, you know, if we pick up, you know, the response times for stage 1 complaints, we're getting better, but we're not there yet. But I wonder, you know, that's a 2023 picture. Sometimes it's useful to see that trend because we're getting better. So when we look at the year overall, we may not have hit it, but it might be that by November, December, we're doing quite well. So if you're able to comment on that would be helpful. But that, again, it shows the progress better, doesn't it? And I think that's the same with the upheld complaints. You know, the headline we've been given is 60% are upheld, but was it 70% at the beginning of the year and 50% at the end of the year kind of thing? You know, that shows, again, it's difficult when you just get one number. You can't really get a sense for how well we're doing in that journey to progress it. And then my other comment was around the training we're providing. You know, the new code comes out next week, actually, isn't it? But great, we're training the managers. I imagine reading this, there's a lot in here about our tenants are concerned about lack of information or lack of updates and that kind of stuff. And I wonder whether how much of that is unintentionally being created by some of our frontline staff that are actually dealing with the tenant in their property, saying, oh yeah, I'll take that away and get back to you. So I just wonder what advice or training we're giving to those frontline staff, particularly in like the repairs and the mould and things, where they're dealing on one-on-one with a tenant, because it's critical what they say, because it's actually that misunderstanding, miscommunication that's probably going to lead to half the complaints anyway. So I'd just be interested to know how you're tackling that one as well, if that's all right.
I'll just give a bit of, in terms of the trends that you mentioned. Obviously, sitting on the Homes and Neighbourhood Improvement Board, we do that. We look back a quarter, we look at the same position last year. So you get a bit more of a flavour of where we are, even if we've not hit the target. But we can look at providing some more information on that. That's helpful. We do look at our performance in that way as well. Just hand to you, into the second point.
Just in terms of training, I think my view, it should be twofold. The one we should be for the managers and investigating managers of complaints. The other one you bang on when the staff need to be trained as well. And when we brought the first incarnation of the policy out in September 22, get my dates right, it was the same. So we did some more in-depth training for managers. But again, there's a suite of training for staff as well. And I think you're absolutely spot on that we need to do staff training as well across the piece. Yeah.
Chair, can I just...
yes, you can, Nath.
Just on your trends question, so when we first came into the council, in terms of complaints handling, our performance was at 43%. Over the last 3 years, we've improved that up to about 60%. So there is an improving trend on complaints handling. What we've seen in trend terms around the number of complaints since we've started campaigning to make it more known about how to complain. We've launched our policy, the Ombudsman and the national campaign from government to ensure that residents and citizens know how to complain has been quite impactful, and that's actually doubled our complaints numbers from 22 to 23. And pretty much we see a doubling in each stage, then stage 1 and stage 2 as well in terms of complaints handling. So I don't think the number of complaints is necessarily a measure of poor performance in handling, but it does say to us that maybe we need to go up and look. One of the key lessons we're learning is we need to get upstream and understand where the service issues are. So the trends and feedback we've had from tenants over the years, and it doesn't really, I don't think you'd be surprised by this, that repairs and maintenance is the number one thing that tenants want us to focus on. And that is the one that generates 75% of the complaints that we see coming through. And then the rest of it is generally around antisocial behaviour. So 25% is around antisocial behaviour in that context. And those trends have remained pretty static. And it just demonstrates what's really important to tenants and what they want the service to focus on.
So just on that, I mean, you know, in my experience in banking, I always welcome complaints because I always see complaints as they shine a bit of a light on an area where perhaps nobody's paying enough attention, so that they're actually helpful to us if we respond positively to them. So yeah, the fact, and I think the whole industry's seen the number of complaints increase as we've been a bit more, as an industry, a bit more willing to say to people, we want you to tell us when we're not getting things right, isn't it? So I'm not sure about that. When I was talking about trends, it was more like if we're getting better at responding within timescales, it's that sort of trend. Because I just get a number that says during the year the average was. Well, was the average worse at the beginning of the year and better at the end of the year? That suggests we're getting better. If it's the other way around, it suggests we're getting worse, doesn't it? It's that sort of thing that I think would be helpful.
Latest figures and on the performance. So we are now, in terms of our stage one, so Naz has talked about where we were last year or the year before, we are now at 72%. So we are in the right direction. And at stage two, we're up to 80%, and that was as of February. Because our targets and the benchmark is 84%, it means that when we haven't hit the targets, but we are definitely going in the right direction.
Councillor Amin.
I've just got a few comments. Something I mentioned earlier. I think the £300,000 cost to the council, it's concerning. Also, and I think this is just something personal from what I've picked up in my ward, there have been a few cases, one in particular. I won't go into a lot of detail, but this gentleman rang up the council. He made 90 calls in one day and he didn't get anywhere. I think at the moment he's at a level of frustration with regards to the repairs. And then on the flip side, I've had another incident or another case, and that was handled really, really swiftly, really, really well, to be quite honest. So, I mean, whilst I acknowledge that there are cases that, you know, are not being dealt with and they're more complicated, I do commend the officers because there are cases where they're doing really, really well.
You want to come back?
Chair, I'll come back. I mean, so what we're reporting today is an improving trend on how we handle, but we've also said we know that we've still got a long way to go. And so, you know, unfortunately for that individual tenant, that must have been very frustrating ringing that many times, and apologise on behalf of the council, really, because that will have come in through the normal access channels into the council. And we'll, if you, outside of the meeting, let us know who that is, then we'll certainly respond immediately to that person's needs.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think I've got anybody else putting their hands up, so once again, thank you very much for the reports and the hard work, and the trajectory is we're getting better, which is brilliant news. Thanks. Okay, I think that's the end of the meeting, so thank you very much, members, for attending, and I'll see you in the next municipal year, the new shape of whatever the council is going to be comprised of. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.